Hi, everybody. My name is Terry Taus. I am the president of the Acceptable Ads Committee, and I am joined on stage today. You've met Claire already from Goodloop. Also with me, I have Leigh Freud from the Network Advertising Initiative, and the NAI is a industry trade group that develops self-regulatory standards for online advertising, and Leigh has a wealth of experience in privacy advertising and public policy, so we're going to have a great panel discussion today. We're going to have Justin Wohl join us, but due to the unpredictableness of air travel, he didn't make it. So if you're here just to see Justin, please send your hate mail to Delta Airlines. It's not our fault. But with that said, Justin will be participating, and fingers crossed the technology will hold up, but we should have his thoughts on some of the discussions today. So let's dive right into it.
Absolutely.
Leigh, we heard about Goodloop to start, but let's talk a little bit about, I mean, this is obviously a very important issue. It's something that is gaining much traction in our industry. The NAI has historically focused on issues like privacy. Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about why sustainability is becoming important to your mandate?
Yeah, so hi everybody. Thanks for joining us for the second day. It's nice to see so many friendly faces. I would say, the NAI isn't focused specifically on sustainability, but our companies are really interested in it. And I think there are a lot of lessons that we can learn from the privacy journey. I'll talk a little bit more about it in more detail later today. But we're at a very interesting inflection point. You've heard a lot of information from Claire. Carbon, output is really, we're starting to be able to measure it. We're starting to understand the impact that we have. And I think as companies try to increase data protection and privacy as a result of trying to comply with all of the laws that are out there, we're facing a really interesting dynamic, and I'll talk about this with my discussion with Matthias later, but it both can help sustainability goals if we're doing privacy responsible things with our data and our advertising, can also hinder it. There's a lot of stuff that goes on behind the scenes that takes a lot of energy and a lot of storage and a lot of data processing power. So we're focused on helping our companies understand that inflection point, and we're also really keen to help those who would like to instill better sustainability in ad tech companies figure out how to do that. It's been very hard to get companies, as a lot of you know, to adopt strong privacy standards without regulation, and we're at the same place with sustainability, I feel like. So does self-regulation help? Do we need actual regulation, or how do we compel this good behavior from companies? And I think a lot of it starts with advertisers, but I'll stop there for now.
No, that's great. We'll dive into that a little bit more. We're going to do our first, tech challenge. We're going to pipe in Justin, who's going to tell us a little bit about, from the publisher's viewpoint, his thoughts on why sustainability is such an important topic for our industry.
Hello to everybody at eyyo's Ad Filtering Dev Summit. My name is Justin Wohl, and I'm the Chief Revenue Officer of Salon.com, Snopes.com, and TVTropes.org. Hello to Terry, and hello to the rest of my panelists. I'm really sorry I couldn't be with you in person today. In the context of our ongoing climate emergency, it's critical that action be taken up and down the supply chain for the advertising industry to be more sustainable overall. As a news publisher, we have a responsibility to our audience to practice what we preach. Through our lens and commentary on politics and culture, climate change is a frequently visited topic. Selecting the right technologies for the delivery of our content and for our advertising business is how we can do our part to reduce our carbon footprint and our emissions overall.
All right, thank you, Justin. We've talked a little bit about why sustainability is important, and Claire, Goodloop has, as Ben mentioned earlier, has been at the forefront of sustainability as it relates to advertising and digital media. And even from my own experience, you're one of the first companies that I spoke to in the space. Can you, and you talked a little bit about what Good Loop is doing in terms of offerings to clients, but can you talk a little bit about, as an industry, what are some of the things that advertisers and brands can and should be doing as it relates to their advertising and specifically digital media advertising?
Sure. I think there's probably a misconception that you have to be like a B Corp to be able to play in this space, right? Or you have to, you have to be extra special. I mean, Good Loop is a B Corp. We were the world's first ad tech platform to become such. And the good thing about being a B Corp, and it's really hard to do, but it forces you to prioritize purpose and profit. So the two things live alongside each other as an organization. So we were always doing this. We were always just like, oh, we should probably measure all these video campaigns that we're, managing on behalf of other brands. And I think that there's been a real shift, right, in the past couple of years. People know there is a problem. Some people didn't know. You don't know what you don't know, right? Hopefully I've sort of opened your eyes to some of the things earlier, just a moment ago. But there are some brands that are really, really good at being, on the forefront of this. Brands like Volvo. Volvo have done incredible things. They now only sell rechargeable vehicles. Say about, lithium batteries, but aside from that, they're selling rechargeable vehicles and battery-powered vehicles. But what they're also doing, and I don't know if you know this, they built a man-made coral reef in Sydney Harbour, all made out of ocean plastic and things like this. They built this as part of an advertising campaign. It's like, why are they doing that? I'll tell you why. They reintroduced 81 species back into Sydney Harbour. And Sydney Harbour, if you've been there, that's got massive cruise liners going through it all day, every day, doing their little dance. And what they've done with us is they've used our green media technology to measure the emissions of their campaign, and then they've also funded coral reef restoration at the same time. So they're winning awards, they're getting in everyone's faces, everyone knows, they're like, oh yeah, I'll probably buy a Volvo, but they're also giving back. And I think it's a really clever way for brands to take the sort of their purpose, their corporate purpose that usually exists on the CSR pages of their website, and no one really engages with it. But it's a really good way to bring that to the foreground and leverage that because, as I said earlier, consumers care. Yeah. They, in the absence of genuine political motivation towards doing things about the planet, and Jesus Christ, I apologise for everything that's going on in the UK right now, but we're arguing about bins and stuff like that instead of like the real problems. But
speed limits.
Oh, Jesus Christ! Don't get me started. That's a whole other panel. But in the absence of real political sort of impetus around these things, people turn to brands. We saw that in the pandemic. There was so much going on, and then cue to all the adverts on TV with, black and white, someone playing a piano, very somber, unprecedented times and all that. But a lot of brands really stepped up, and they built equity whilst doing that. So I think there are some really brave brands. Nature Valley is another one. They're all about get out and enjoy the wonderfulness of our planet. But if you need a cereal, you need to eat your breakfast first, so take a cereal bar. That cereal bar, they've open sourced the packaging so that it's completely sustainable, but also they're working with us to fund forest restoration, and they've restored like 10,000 kilometers of track, like wild hikes in the US, that weirdly starts to reintroduce buffaloes and stuff like that. So it's all quite tangential, but it actually comes back to them demonstrating their values. So there's some really exciting things. The problem can be fear of backlash. People are very quick to tweet or X or whatever you do nowadays. I don't know, who knows, to voice their displeasure. But so there are some really brave brands, but you don't have to be a sustainability brand to be able to play in this space.
Right.
To me, it's good practice.
Right.
Just in the same way as you probably prioritize, you should be prioritizing viewability, ad fraud, low ad fraud, really good quality brand suitability metrics. You should also be prioritizing carbon in the same way. It's another KPI to sort of a hygiene factor to measure the success of your campaign.
Well, the industry hopefully is heading in that direction, especially with the work that you guys are doing over at Good Loop. actually, it's a good segue because Justin is going to tell us now how Salon.com is working to enhance sustainability of digital advertising that's served on their own properties. So we're going to go to Justin.
Programmatic advertising is the lifeblood of our website's revenue stream. It's not inherently an efficient technology, though. For many, many years now, publishers have been told to maximize bid density in order to maximize demand for their advertising inventory. That often means sending multiple requests for the same impression opportunity to the buy side. But it wasn't until the last few years that the concept of QPS was ever even known on the publishing side of the industry. QPS is queries per second, and it means how many requests a DSP can actually listen to or process. And what we learned is that we're sending so many requests that some of them are being thrown out. Essentially, we created so much bid density, so many requests, that not all of them could even be listened to. That should be our first sign as an industry that what we were doing was inefficient. We were creating requests that were never even being sent along to the buyers. This is our point as an industry to take a look at the levers that we have control over and to pull them back. We don't need to be sending more requests than are ever even being considered.
It's a really, really good point. And I would, as the privacy person on the panel, I would make the point that reducing bid density and understanding where your requests are going and who's reacting to them is also a privacy-preserving technology. So when we talk about sustainability, I like to think about it as holistic sustainability. We should be building a sustainable industry that does better for consumers, better for the environment, and I think all of those things, there's levers that you can push that actually help all of those things at the same time.
Yeah, no.
Sorry, I didn't mean to jump in, but
no, that's a great point. And just as an aside, someone who's been in ad tech for a while, QPS is a made-up term to sell consulting services. So
yes.
It didn't really exist for any reason other than consultants.
Things made up.
Yeah.
Imagine we would make something up.
That's a great point. How from a privacy perspective, and I know there's a lot of people here that are interested in the privacy aspect of what we're discussing. But sustainability has that flip side, which is that the same goals that we're pursuing from a sustainability perspective also have that privacy implication. Claire, with respect to some of the projects that you've worked on with clients, has that come up? Are they separating the concept of sustainability and privacy, or is it more of a holistic, let's do good and?
Yeah, I think the reasons why people engage with Good Loop is because they want to it's sort of like something to action, something to activate. And, we've got formats, we've got all these other different things that we can do, and we can help them with that. Privacy less so, but definitely sort of reputation enhancing, doing what they say they're going to do, that kind of thing is what people tend to come to us about. I think consumers more and more of the internet, if they want to consume a free internet, right, they do expect a sort of element of transaction in terms of their attention. But I think it's really what we try and do is the advertising solutions that we do, for example, they're completely opt-in. It's completely like it's your choice if you want to watch it. But when you do, you're going to get a reward. We're going to fund a charity on your behalf, etc. So there's a sort of tacit understanding that consumers know that their eyeballs are worth something, but at what cost, right? Unless you want to just have real trash on the internet.
Right.
So good quality advertising should be funding good quality content on the internet, and the solution that we have, the domain filtering tool, allows you to completely eradicate MFAs, for example. So those really trashy, awful, doesn't do anything for the brand or for your mind when you're consuming it, content, which, you'll get bombarded by 25 adverts and you're like, where's the content? I don't know. Get rid of those. Don't need those.
Yeah, although I will say,
wasteful.
Advertisers buy them because people click on ads in those sites, right? And so what you have to do is completely change. I agree, but it completely you have to change the conversation.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not about clicks. Maybe it's a different form of engagement that you're measuring, because at the moment, MFA sites exist because people buy them.
Yeah.
Because they work based on certain metrics.
Because
I agree,
can't find
crap.
can't find the
Right. No,
content.
they're clicking all over
Like-
to try to find the content, but advertisers are seeing,
Yeah.
whatever the metric is that they're measuring. So
I wonder
think
what
you've
the
got to
carbon
really
cost of that click is, right?
outrageous, I'm sure.
I think
Clicking
we're
on
going
a
to find out
website.
later. I think Brian's going to tell us about it. But
Exciting.
it's a great point because also from the perspective of the user, made for advertising sites are made for advertisers, not for users. So it is a terrible
Yep.
user
Yeah.
experience. And even though it might be optimizing towards some advertiser metric, at the end of the day, in the long term, it's not what users
That's
want.
nothing. Yeah.
And why we're here at the Ad Filtering Dev Summit is a big part of that. So. Okay, we're going to, before we do this, Leigh, I wanted to ask you,
Yeah.
in terms of privacy and sustainability, how can focusing on both of those strengthen the advertising industry? So not specific brands, but the industry in general, the relationship with consumers and society at large.
Yeah, so, one thing that I always like to say and that I tell our companies all the time, without people that want to see and buy things that are seen on advertisements, you have no business. So people have to come first. And I don't like to call them users or consumers. That depersonalizes it. We have to talk about people and what people want. And so I think we have to start there from both a privacy standpoint and a sustainability standpoint. I'll note that we represent a lot of ad tech companies, which in some circles are known as third-party companies, and therefore they're evil. But what we really want to focus on is what is the consumer experience? If you take away third-party cookies, which we all are taking away, and we take away any opportunity for intermediaries to connect with users, and Google and Meta continue to target your ads, and Amazon, the big ones, who have first-party data, continue to target ads in the same way, the user experience doesn't change, right? You still feel like there's creepy ads that follow you around, and ad filtering, therefore, is really one of the only solutions for folks that don't want to do that. So you have to change that conversation, and I think that, there are a few key things that you can do to help both sustainability and privacy. You can use less data. As Justin mentioned, don't put out as many bids. Think about your partners and your vendors and have a finite, smaller list of those. I don't think in today's world that damages your potential profitability. Don't keep data for very long, and we can talk about that later in my section.
Right.
I talk about how what's the average purchase funnel and how long you keep data. When I was at AOL, I remember engineers saying to me, "Well, why do I ever need to delete data?
Right.
I want to keep this because there might be a purpose for it later." Well, we've got to get rid of that concept and think about what do we need the data for? Only use it for that purpose. We can't take in geolocation data for an advertisement because we want a Starbucks coupon or whatever area we're close to, and then go ahead and resell that to a government who might be looking for Starbucks next to abortion clinics in the United States, for example, which
Right.
is a very big. While we're apologizing for governments, may I do that on our behalf as well. So there's lots of things that we can, very simple data strategies that we can employ that I think help both privacy and sustainability.
Of course, because there is a carbon cost to storing all that data and
100%.
without a purpose. Let's go to Justin. He's going to give us his thoughts from a publisher's perspective.
The publishing community has a chance to develop and strengthen the relationship that we have with our readers by speaking to both their privacy concerns and their sustainability concerns at the same time. So first and foremost, by selecting direct-only channels and knowing the buyer for every ad impression that we sell, we are able to better ensure the privacy of our readership by telling them that their data is only going to certain known places. Inherently, the more requests that we send out, the more parties that are involved in completing an advertising transaction, the more potential data leakage and spread there is for our user. When we introduce resellers and multiple hops for user data, we can't necessarily have the same confidence that we know what's happening. We're beyond the days of fans revving up when a website takes a long time to load on your laptop. But that is still very much the case. The more data that has to be transacted, the slower the load will be for the website. And in a day when users are looking for things to be faster and faster and faster, we can speak to this loading speed problem by cleaning up our ad stacks as publishers.
I'm ex-publisher. I worked at The Guardian for 9 years before I went to work at Goodloop. And the race to the bottom was just extraordinary. Like when I first started working there, we would, £1 million weeks, like revenue coming out of our ears. We were constantly selling out because we did everything direct. And inventory was reserved for months in advance, and it was bloody awesome. And then the open marketplace came along, and we sort of became hooked on it. It became like that, that shortfall, like, oh God, yeah, horrendous. And then we were in this sort of fight between direct revenues and programmatic revenues, and that push-pull constantly, and agencies going, why would I commit to you at $20 CPM when I can just buy it through the back door for 2 pence? And that sort of, we had a huge amount of SSPs onboarded at The Guardian. I spoke to the Financial Times a couple of weeks ago. They only have one, and they trade all of their inventory direct. They've maintained their yields. They've maintained their CPMs completely. They're still really, really profitable. They haven't, they have a paywall, and there's that understanding between their users that they get that editorial, they pay for it, but they're also going to be served some advertising, but not too much.
Right.
Whereas at The Guardian, we always had this sort of fewer, better strategy, right? Less ads on the page, less clutter, really beautifully designed, polite loading that happened just in time. But then again, we had to hit targets. Then we introduced ad refresh. Ad refresh is so frustrating. You just got this sort of blinker going on every 30 seconds. You're trying to concentrate on a really good in-depth article. You're giving your time, and then you've just got this, like, I don't know if you ever have this, but I get the, you look at a weird color and it starts to do things. It just becomes really, really frustrating. But we were forced to do that because people wanted everything cheap. And buy cheap, buy twice. It's frustrating.
Yeah, I would make 2 points alongside Claire's point. One is direct buys work really well for The Guardian and for some of Justin's sites.
Yeah.
They don't work so well for the long tail, which is why programmatic advertising was created to begin with. And so, so there has to be a push-pull there, I think, although I understand the frustration coming from AOL in the days when AOL was a walled garden. The other point that I'll make is ad load. You mentioned ad load and ad refresh, and we often make the point in privacy, although we really think that there is a path forward for privacy-responsible, data-driven advertising. If you take the data away, I think a lot of folks, especially the FTC in the United States, seem to be really grasping onto contextual advertising as like, oh, you can do all of this, just don't use data. Just put golf ads on ESPN and put, whatever, which again works for larger contextual publishers, but not necessarily for the long tail, because how many knitting ads are there to appear on Joe's knitting.com? I don't know, that's maybe a bad example. But if you take the data-driven insights away, the amount of ads that you have to put on a page in order to make the same amount of money is outrageous.
Right.
And you're going to have the bad experience that Claire was talking about. So there's a balance, as with everything.
Because CPMs will go through the floor if that is the case. At least studies have shown that
CPMs will go through the floor, but also your user, you're back to people, right? The people will
Publishers
will
still
not,
need to have the same revenue coming in to support their operations.
Yeah, and if you want to have a sort of equitable internet, you have to give revenue to those smaller voices. If you want to ensure that you're investing in DE&I, for example, you want to make sure that you're not just putting everything with those publisher powerhouses, and making sure that you're funding a diversity of voice as well on the internet.
And at the Acceptable Ads Committee, a big focus of ours is balancing that value exchange between the stakeholders, between what the users want, but also what the publishers and advertisers need to have a free, open web. We've seen a lot of traction in sustainability over the last year, more so than I was personally expecting, but we haven't yet reached that tipping point. This is for both of you. What do you think is one of the major barriers that are preventing brands or agencies from going all in on sustainability?
I think there's a slight misconception that it costs more. Everyone's like, oh, I don't want to pay for that. It's another tech tax, right? But ultimately what it does is help you deliver more efficient campaigns so you save money elsewhere. So, save money on your ad serving fees, for example, because you're running lighter creatives. Awesome. Stop funding trash and start, funding good things. You're going to get better brand resonance for you, more, intent to purchase, more, all those kind of trust factors, those brand metrics and marketing metrics that, agencies are ultimately designed to provide. But the other, as I said earlier, the other problem is a fear of getting things wrong. It's, off topic, but no one wants a repeat of Bud Light, right? And, which, that's a whole other, again, another panel.
Right.
But I think there's a real fear about getting it wrong, and also people not wanting to, they're waiting for the guidance, and they're waiting for standards to come in, and waiting for political insistence on it. And that's coming. California have just passed a bill. If you're making over $1 billion, you have to start, publishing your Scope 3 emissions and do something about it. It's also coming in the EU as well. There's all sorts there's loads and loads and loads happening. And then the self-regulating bit is really interesting. There are so many people signed up within the industry to organizations like AdNet Zero, and the IAB are doing loads and loads of work in this space. So there's a lot of impetus, and there's a lot of collaboration, and there's, in America, everyone's calling it pre-competitive. It's absolutely not. Everyone's competing. I think it's a lofty, yeah.
I've never even heard that.
I know, right? And everyone's like, all the agencies are like, we're really pre-competitive about this. And they're all like, but it's good. It's healthy, and what it does is it prompts more innovation and more pushing, and anything that's going to keep this at the foreground, because this isn't going to go away. It's not like when viewability came along, and Group M said one thing and IAB said another thing, and then everyone was like, oh, we've done it now. That's just the way. This problem isn't going away.
Right.
Just because we get it to 2030 and we're like, hey, look, the internet decarbonized it. It's still a problem, and so it has to be factored into every single element of a business. So yeah, misconceptions of price and fear of getting things wrong.
Yeah, I'll add two more.
Yeah.
Scale. I think, it's great that Nature Valley and Volvo are looking at, are leading the way on sustainability. I think for companies that are business partners of big brands, they're not going to do it unless the big brand tells them to do it, and the big brand isn't going to do it unless their biggest competitor is doing it. So
Yeah.
it's a vicious cycle, and so I think scale. And once that tipping point starts, I think you'll see scale, you'll see adoption much more rapidly. The second thing that I'll add, and again, coming from the privacy perspective, is resources. So, I'm not sure if I'm a company that's using third-party cookies and maybe hasn't really paid attention to the regulations and now has to scramble not only with compliance with a myriad of state laws, but also with figuring out my strategy and my technology and employing smart engineers like those in this room. They don't have time to think about sustainability, right? And so unless it becomes, unless the floods in the streets of New York are compelling people to do something different, if my company won't survive the privacy challenges, why do I have to worry about sustainability? That's a next year problem or a next quarter problem. And so I think there's a real resource. It's different people that work on those issues, but it's all, it's all interrelated, and it's really hard. And I think companies are overwhelmed and struggling.
Yeah.
So I would add those two factors to to why we're not further along.
Yeah, great point. We're going to hear, Justin's going to tell us his viewpoint from the publisher's perspective. So let's go to that.
Ultimately, so much of our industry has moved to cloud hosting that we have an opportunity to seek standardization and measurement in our emissions from those hosts themselves. Be it AWS, Azure, NetApp, what have you. We have a chance to look to our hosts to be able to tell us what the emissions are resulting from all of our server activity.
Yeah, standardization, I think, is one very important aspect that we're going to have to get the industry aligned with. And I know that AdNet Zero is working on it. The IAB is working on it. There's a lot of groups. The Acceptable Ads Committee is conducting a user research on the need for standards. So a lot of good work happening in the space. We've got a little bit of time left. I want to keep some time for Q&A, but we also have a video that we're going to play in just a second. But before we do that, any last comments for either of you before?
Oh God, save the whales. No, I just can't help but think that there's an opportunity here and there's momentum here and there's enough passionate people within the industry. As I said earlier, there's a massive movement of organizations and, you know, we're collaborating, we talk, we know one another, we see each other at the same breakfast. There's so much, but it can't just stay within our pool of like, oh yeah, you're right, hello, we're at a sustainability thing again. It needs to tip over into the mainstream and it needs to sort of imbue itself across every element of an organization. And I think it's really, really important that we identify people that within our organizations who are able to sort of push it and so that it becomes the mainstay for how businesses do well. So I really hope that that passion, but also that the recognition of the necessity of it really starts to come through in the next year or so, because we really don't have time.
Right.
As evidenced by those floods in New York.
Yeah.
Leigh?
Yeah, I really, I think Claire's right that we're at a very important inflection point, and I think, you know, people like Claire and people like Brian from Scope 3 spreading the word and beyond our echo chamber is a really important thing. And I also think, you know, the impetus is on the advertisers, right? Because if the advertisers force it, everyone in the data flow below it will do it, all the way down to, you know, ad tech and measurement providers, et cetera. So yeah, and more to come from me, so I'm going to stop talking.
Looking forward to that. We've got a video, actually, speaking of ad tech, we've got a video from Brian O'Kelly, who is one of, I guess you could call him one of the godfathers of ad tech. He was, you know, very instrumental in bringing the programmatic industry to fruition. He's now with Scope 3, and he's got a video that we're going to play as it relates to sustainability. And in the meantime, if you've got any questions, we'll open up for Q&A right afterwards.
I'm Brian O'Kelly, CEO and co-founder of Scope 3. About 2 years ago, I started Scope 3 with a pretty big mission to decarbonize the media and advertising industry. Now, that's a big task. But really, if you break it down into its basic pieces, it's not that hard. You've got ads that fund content. Those ads are going through some complex or simple process to be matched with a user. And if you add up all of the carbon in those processes, you can kind of figure out where the problem is. And when I first did this analysis 2 years ago on a scratch piece of paper, I think the numbers really basically boil down to things you'd probably guess. What's the ad load? How many ads are on a given piece of content? And what kind of creatives run on that content? And what technology is used to choose which ads are served? Those are the three big factors. If you can have fewer ads, and you can have lighter creative, and you can have less technology used to select the creative, you have a much more sustainable internet. Now, some of those things might impact revenue. And so the big challenge for us is we don't want to impact reach or performance for advertisers. We want to make sure that publishers still make a ton of money, and we want the user experience to be excellent. The idea that you could actually improve user experience without harming publisher revenue, and you could have a major impact on the environment, that's a pretty big deal. Because I realized that this is the only way to fundamentally change the way the internet works. We can tweak things. We can make creatives a little bit lighter. We can get rid of programmatic intermediaries. We can do a lot of little stuff. But fundamentally, the relationship between advertisers, publishers, and people is at the heart of the internet. And the more we can optimize that, the more we can deliver fewer, better ads or more high-impact content that doesn't come with this huge sustainability cost or user experience cost or, you know, all the other ad problems we've seen, privacy and everything else, we've kind of found the holy grail. So I think that's what I want everyone to be thinking about is, can we kind of square the circle here? What can we do to continue to improve users' experience of the internet, while we also make the internet greener and more profitable and more effective for advertisers. That's what I think about every single day. I know it's something that all of you think about every day, and I would just encourage you to continue to make this not a trade-off, but something that's a holistic way of thinking about how we monetize and how we experience the internet as we know and love it. So if you're interested in learning more about Scope 3, of course, we have a website you can check out. Just for fun, there's a new feature that we released yesterday, which is that, and you can do this for free. If you go to our website and you type in any domain, you'll see some baseline sustainability score. So it'll say, hey, New York Times is green. It'll say some other website is yellow because it's a little bit higher carbon. We added a feature. If you click advanced on the side, you can actually expand and it will say, view this through a particular seller. And if you go in there and you type block through, what you'll notice is that it significantly lowers the climate impact because we're properly modeling the impact. The positive impact is better not just for your pocketbook, but for your planet. Thanks for everything you do.
All right. Ben, do we have time for?
We've got a few minutes. Yeah, we can kind of take our time.
All right.
So, wow, quick on the draw there, buddy. Go for it.
Oh my God, I've never seen this before.
It's a catch box. We invented it yesterday.
Is it on?
I don't know. It was a bad invention. We're sending that back to the shop.
Sorry.
If we got to go with
Jacked.
a particular mic, I can run around with it. That's fine. Yeah.
A bummer. It was so much
Oh,
fun.
it's so
Yesterday
much
we were
fun.
throwing it back and forth.
Yeah, don't throw the
I'll
mic.
get it working later.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, Claire, I thought the dashboard you showed where you can kind of select how sustainable of a platform you're choosing to
Invest in,
work with
yeah.
is. And I think Brian was showing something similar. I was curious if you could share more details on how you're getting that kind of data and
Sure.
if you make that available for other purposes potentially.
Yes, so Good Loop's product, basically, when we first started it, because we wanted to capture the creative, the supply path, the energy used in the supply path, and the publisher, the easiest way for us to do it, to get going, was to build just generate a pixel. And we kind of called it, it's like a viewability pixel, but for the planet. And everyone was like, what? But basically, when subscribers to our solution, they basically come along, upload their creative. We weigh that in the back end. So we have a tool that weighs that asset and understands all the different layers to it, whether it be the image, the font files, the CNDs, CDN, I always get confused. And we understand the total weight of that asset. And then the pixel also monitors the data transfer of that campaign through the whole ecosystem, and then we have a crawler that understands publishers, basically. And what we do is we load that publisher up on a sort of test page. This all happens in seconds, and we understand the total amount of ad slots within that page and how many SSPs that they have on their site. And so we're able to take those 3 buckets of data and pull that through. So that's what's displayed in the dashboard. That's a lot of boring data. And so what we decided to do was try to make it as user-friendly as possible. And I don't know if you noticed earlier, but there was a rotation. You can convert, 6 tons of CO2 is the equivalent roughly of like 5.5 long-haul flights. It's probably about 26,000 kettles boiled. So we wanted to turn it into sort of real-world examples because, as you say, the user at the end who's just like, I've just got to optimize a campaign to this like stupid viewability score and click-throughs. And if someone's watching it, are they clicking on it? Who knows? I don't know. And then they're like, oh, and I've also got to factor carbon into this. This is all too much. So that's how we capture it. But we also have an API that we can provide ad tech platforms and advertisers for their own in-house sort of, and agencies for their own in-house reporting as well. So we can work with them in 2 ways.
Cool, thank you.
Pleasure.
Questions? Got one here in the front. Maybe We'll do an assist here. Whoa.
This is so exciting.
There we go.
Thank you. Yeah, so I have a question. It's actually so loud. So there are many players in the whole industry, and there are many companies evolving now, doing alternative targeting ways, and it's like every year, if we see this landscape, there are more and more companies. It's also not sustainable to have that many companies. But whose position do you think is stronger now to be able for the industry to reach sustainability, like adopted faster? Is it brands or vendors? Who can do that faster to demand the rest of the industry to be caring about it?
Yeah, I guess it's about choice, right? Like vendors have got to create solutions in the first place that are good, but advertisers need to demand it. And advertisers need to be brave, but they're not going to until there's a method within which they can do it and enact their strategy. So I think it's an element of both. For publishers, I think good quality publishers are going to be completely on board with this, right? They're completely like, yeah, this makes total sense. And, you know, I obviously, ex-Guardian, they've been talking about the climate crisis since like 1870. Really going on about it for a really long time, and finally people are listening. But so I think it's about demand, as always, but again, supply of good quality products, and that proliferation of companies that are using data, using the data that's been made available through Scope 3, through Good Loop, et cetera, they're ultimately prepping themselves for when that demand comes along. And right now is the experimental stage. So it's like learn again. Oh, that didn't work this time. There was too much friction on getting this sorted. How can we make this easier, et cetera, et cetera. So right now I'm kind of like, I don't think I could get any more busy, but I'm ready for when everyone's clear on how we do this, because it's so nascent, but also climate science is changing constantly, and new peer-reviewed papers are coming out all the time that we have to like wade through to figure out that, you know, are we doing the right thing? Is our language correct around all of this? But ultimately, as you said, it's about, well, I think it's people first, consumers of the products, but also people within organizations, within those advertisers, within those brands demanding it. But as I said, you don't have to be a brand that sells sustainable things in order to prioritize sustainability within your advertising, and it should just be the new normal. That's my really lofty ambition. Just like make it really boring almost so that everyone just does it. But yeah, I think it's an element of the two.
Yeah, I agree. I think, you know, I like the expression you use, which is advertisers and ad tech need to be brave. You know, you've got to, in order to get the scale and adoption that is required to make any difference at all, you need to have scale. And so I think it's a two-way street. I think you're right. Advertisers, ad tech companies aren't going to do anything unless they have to.
Yeah.
Right. And I mean, anybody is.
It takes a lot of work,
right? It's because of the development involved. So I think advertisers have to demand it, but I think ad tech companies and vendors also need to be brave in experimenting and thinking of ways of technologies and tools that can help advertisers be brave.
Yeah.
So I think it's both.
And what we're trying to do is work with those brands like General Mills, who are using our, you know, domain filter to go up to publishers and say, guys, you've really got to improve this. Like, otherwise, and we don't want to defund publishers, absolutely not. We want to drive more revenue to the good quality ones, the ones that are putting good quality climate journalism rather than climate misinformation out into the ether. Right. We want to be able to drive good levels of revenue towards the publishers that do care, and reward them as such, so that they can continue funding it. Because block lists, let's face it, flood, that's on a block list. Pandemics, that's on a block list. Yeah. You know, everything like that, all the main things that are caused by the climate crisis, you know, floods, fires, famine,
generally blocked,
are always blocked. And so there's a disincentive for publishers to invest, you know, their money getting their journalists to create this kind of editorial if they're not even going to be able to monetize it, because the verification partners are like, no, even though the engagement is so high. Like, News brands really struggle, and news brands are like the best in terms of building brands and people spending time and that quality and that discernment and that, you know, choice. They're choosing to go onto that publisher's website. That's their brand, that's their news source. Reuters, Bloomberg, this is where I go. I have the most trust in this. So of course I'm implicitly going to trust the advertising that's on it if it's good quality and it doesn't follow me around the internet, et cetera, et cetera. So I think it's everyone really. It's everyone's responsibility. We can't keep on thinking, well, and the Spider-Man meme of everyone pointing at each other. This is not sustainable, genuinely. So, you know, I would hope that, you know, everyone recognises that, you know, the demand is completely essential and that everyone needs to sort of contribute something and bring something to the table to help.
I think we can do one more. I know our clock reads
So, yeah,
zero
you've got
here,
me.
but-
I've really
we
hit
good.
my cruise.
No, I mean, you even got, we got into brand safety issues there. We were at the nexus of another panel.
I know, yeah.
But let's do one more. And I know despite the clock there, we're actually running 10 minutes late, so we have a few. We're all good.
Hey, Claire, you mentioned asset optimization supported in your platform, and there were a few mentions to ad formats during the panel, but have there been like any actual conversations about reduction of presence of video ads? Because that's also
really
not just
hard,
considered unsustainable, but also very intrusive or very annoying from the part of the users.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it, video? Because everyone, you know, a few years ago when everyone was going, it's year of the mobile, look, we can do vertical video. And everyone was like, Jesus Christ, is that it? Look, I work at Goodloop. We're a video-first solution, but what we do, as I said earlier on, is we incentivize people to watch them and not hit that tempting skip button, right? Like, it's choice. We only run in premium pre-roll slots. There's not that much inventory. There's usually a frequency cap of how many can run before you get to your meaty content, and most good quality publishers are going to, you know, have a limit on, you know, if the bit of content is less than a minute long, they're not going to put a 30-second pre-roll on it. Like, good quality ones know what they're doing. I guess, yeah, with regular display assets, there are so many layers that can be optimized within it. So you can build one better from the ground up, whereas with video, it's really, really hard. And then we have to think about how much data is required and how much energy is required to compress those assets as well. So we're not there yet. We haven't got a solution in that respect. But then there is there's you know, you've got companies like Seen This who are, you know, creating streaming technology so that you know, asset isn't downloaded to the device, it's just streamed, it's cut up and it's streamed. So there are architectural solutions that are coming along, but again, it takes experimentation and it takes time, and I guess it's a challenge to the people in this room, like, how do we fix video? Come on. Maybe we'll do a workshop later. But yeah, it's a difficult one. It's hard. They are intrusive. For me, I'd rather see it in a pre-roll slot up where I expect to see it rather than one that pops up and stays there for the whole time and gives you a false sense of security in terms of it having performed well. Same with Outstream, really intrusive, and then it carries on playing or the sound's on, et cetera, et cetera. I think a good quality publisher will always have it sound off. You know, if they care about their user experience, sound off, thank you. You know, don't scream at me while I'm, you know, trying to read a intense article. But yeah, it is a problem, and it's one that, you know, we do need to fix, and also uses a huge amount of data.
Yeah, and I would say that's where the Acceptable Ads Committee can come in creating standards that make those ads less intrusive. You know, and I think there's some room for creativity, right? My son and I were watching something the other day, and it was there were ads and video ads embedded within the program that we were watching, but the ads were a story. So the first short ad was a video that started, and it was like, wow, it just stopped in the middle of that ad, but it was purposeful. And then the next time there was a commercial, it told the next.
Cliffhangers.
It's the woman who sends her husband out to get the right kind of makeup. right? Which we all know is a disaster waiting to happen. But he eventually found the right. He found the right one. But it was a story that told that journey, and I think that's creative, and it's and it didn't feel intrusive. It felt, oh, I want to kind of figure out if the guy got it right.
Yeah.
So there's creativity, but I also think standards. No video on, no pop-ups. There's lots of ways that we can build standards around that.
Yeah, and Brian talked about the Holy Grail, which is a great user experience, privacy protected and sustainable. And that's luckily it seems like all of those are coalescing in the same direction. The things that are good for a user experience are also good for privacy and sustainability. We just kind of gotta get the industry to move in that direction.
I think there are also lessons that you can learn from social here, right? They're the masters of doing short form video, absolutely awesome, and still getting an advertising message across in a really, 7 seconds? Does a creative need to be 30 seconds long? No. Like, we're not at the cinema. We're not expecting a cinematic experience. We're seeing it on something that's the size of a credit card if you're watching it on desktop. It doesn't need to be 30 seconds long. Could you do this? That's a challenge to creative agencies. Can you get the same message across with 10 seconds or 20 seconds, or even less? Like, you do it for social, why wouldn't you do it for desktop, especially when everyone's so time poor, but people are becoming a lot more conscious of, data. And everything like that. So there are some lessons that can be learnt there and applied. We still treat everything like it's completely different. It's not the same.
And sorry to the men who happen to know what brand and color their.
That was the first thing I was going to say.
I didn't mean to offend anybody by saying that was a disaster. In my case, it would have been a disaster.
I bought my wife makeup this morning, and she may be here later, so you can be the judge.
Nice.
But that is it. Fascinating panel. Leigh, Claire, Terry, and Justin, if you can hear us, thank you so much. Let's hear it for our panel, everybody.
Cheers.